Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted this morning to introduce Steve Jones, who's the Director of Operations for the Shrewsbury Street Pastors. We will hear how their volunteers are out every weekend on the streets of Shrewsbury, working alongside the emergency services to help the most vulnerable people. When I first contacted Steve, he told me that he came along with a rucksack, which he unpacks during the talk. Well, the rucksack is here, so we're very interested to see what's inside. Thank you, Steve.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are delighted to be here because you will notice that I am joined by two of my colleagues. My name's Steve Jones.
I'm Jack Harper.
And I'm Pauline Jones.
And we are all street pastors here in Shrewsbury. So today we're going to talk to you about the work that we do every weekend out on the streets of this amazing town. And to give you a little bit of a flavour about what we do and the type of things we come across. It's always great to sort of come and talk to any group of sort of people, but such a large number of you is just amazing. We did actually go and talk to U3A in Welshpool. I think that was me and Jack. We went to do that. We normally talk to a lot of WIs and Towns Women's Guild. And I have to say to you, I went to one WI and there was one lady who came up to me before I started and she said, "Oh, you're our speaker tonight, are you?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And she said, "Have you been on our speakers course? Because if you talk to the WI, you need to go on a speakers course." And I've been pre-warned by the lady who booked me, and I sort of said, "Oh no, am I supposed to have done?" To which she then said to the lady who did the bookings, "Why is this man here? He hasn't done the course." To which the lady, "I've heard him before, and actually he's not bad." So hopefully that's going to be your experience this morning. We did actually go and talk to a WI the other night, and they'd been recommended to listen to us because Jack had been to another one and he'd done an equally impressive talk. So between us, we'll give you the information, and then we've always got Pauline who will give us the checks and the balances to make sure we've got it right.
That's my role.
Pauline and I are both members of U3A, and it won't come as any surprise, Jack isn't. Okay, as was said, we do have a rucksack, so you're going to get a mixture of sort of bits and pieces from us. We're going to unpack the rucksack, and we're going to give you a few sort of stories as we go along. Now, we are all street pastors, and we always say, if you don't see us coming, you will always see us going, because we all wear the same uniform. We're all sporting slightly different versions of it. But actually, we are part of an international organisation. So Street Pastors is actually a franchise. So we have our licence to cover Shrewsbury. And we get our licence from this organisation. I'm not sure if my little dot's not going to work in a big space. But it's from a place called Ascension Trust. And basically what happened is in 2003, the local authority and the police in Brixton in London approached a very charismatic Jamaican church minister, a pastor, and said, "We have got a major problem." So bearing in mind, 2003, Brixton in London, it won't come to any surprise what their problem was. The problem they had, and unfortunately they still have, was knife crime. And basically there were lots of gangs, lots of turf wars, and basically it was the local authority and the police approaching the church and saying, "Can you do something?" Now Ascension Trust always had this sort of idea that they've got school pastors. School pastors are people who go into schools before sort of school starts, when school finishes, and they basically do a befriending, mentoring role. And that's their role within a sort of a school. And school pastors was going to be the thing that Ascension Trust had as their big initiative. Well, Street Pastors has basically overtaken that leaps and bounds. And actually, it is now international. So they do have street pastors in Jamaica. Now, it won't come as any surprise, I quite fancy an exchange. Now, I think I'd look dashing in Bermuda shorts.
As you can imagine, I'm not so sure.
But we're absolutely certain that Jack probably would even look better than I would. But it basically works on the local authority, the church and the police working together. So we are volunteers largely that come from churches. We do have some volunteers who don't. But in order to be a street pastor, you need to come from a local church. So my church is Trinity Millbrace, and I'm Anglican.
I'm a Catholic.
And my church is Hope Church, which is New Frontiers.
So very much a different sort of mix of sort of people here this morning. But we have 28 partner churches, and 17 of those will have street pastors. So we've got Anglicans, Catholics, Baptists, Methodists, a whole range of in-between, from New Frontier churches, which is Jack, to Cellar Church, Home Church, you name it, we've more or less got it. And all our people that go out on the streets at the weekend go out on a voluntary basis. So, you won't see all of these, but these dots, that's, oh, my little dot does work, that's us, Shrewsbury, Telford, Stoke-on-Trent, we've got one up in Wrexham, and then when we were at U3A in Welshpool, somewhere along there is Newtown, I reckon it's about here. But one lady reckoned it was somewhere up there, so I don't quite know. I think she's had sherry with her tea. But anyway, we are part of that sort of national organisation. Oh, come on, you want to work? You do want to work. Right, I always sort of show this slide simply because it actually shows that we have street pastors in Oxford, Epsom, Canterbury, Dover, it's on Portsmouth, the Isle of Wight. I'm not quite sure. I think that must be a lifeboat. I'm not sure quite what the water. But basically, wherever that you will have a university or a college, you will have street pastors. And we all operate more or less in the same kind of way, as you would imagine with a franchise, so that we do a lot of things that are the same, but we do some things that are significantly different. So, this is going to be interesting.
No, it's fine. You've got the whiz kid here. This is why he's here.
There we go. So 8.5 years ago, a public protection officer and the guy who was responsible for the nighttime security actually approached the then Bishop of Shrewsbury, Mark Rylands, and actually approached him at the police station up at Monkmoor, and they actually locked him in a room. And they locked him in a room and said, "Bishop, we have got a problem in Shrewsbury and we need some help." Now, please be assured, it never has and hopefully never will be knife crime. That was not our issue. The issue that we had here was following 2 recommendations from the coroner, and it was for river deaths. There were 7 river deaths a year because of drugs and alcohol. And basically they said to the bishop, "Can you please do something in order to try and sort of stem that?" So what happened is that they came up with this idea that we would have Shrewsbury Street Pastors. We started off with an initial 18 volunteers. So 18 people came forward, not really knowing what they were going to do, what they were going to go out on the streets to do, and we now have 40. So our volunteers actually volunteer for 2 years. They volunteer to go out twice a month for 2 years. So overall 24 shifts. So that's not too bad. And somebody said, "Oh, don't you do every weekend?" We are out on a Friday. We meet at 10 o'clock on both Friday and a Saturday. On a Friday, we're out till 1 o'clock in the morning. And on a Saturday, you can get home any time between 3 and...
My latest was 6:30. That I finished. I got home at 7.
I try not to be out quite that late.
But basically what happens is that we come forward and we agree to do that. But we also get 46 hours of training. So it's quite a big sort of bit. The 3 bits in red are things that people do first off. And those are the first 3 bits when you get your uniform. Now, Pauline is sporting a polo shirt, but also a fleece jacket.
No, it's my sweatshirt jacket.
Sweatshirt jacket.
I've got the jacket.
Yeah. I've also got a nice, very smart blue shirt, and I'm wearing the only bit of fitted uniform, which is our autumn jacket.
Note, it's only fitted for men. It doesn't fit women at all well. It's shaped like this.
As part of the uniform, we actually get 3 hats. Now, I'm not even going to attempt to wear this one. Come over here, young man. He's going to put this one on.
You can imagine what it looks like on me, can't you?
There you go.
I look like Coco the Clown in it.
You're probably thinking, well, actually, it doesn't say Street Pastors on the top. In fact, it does. And for those of you that go to the U3A Welsh groups, you'll be able to tell them that actually this is a Welsh beanie hat. Because obviously we're very close to the Welsh border. Now, obviously, Jack looks very handsome in his beanie. I don't. We get another cap, which is this one. And I must admit, when I got it, I thought, I really don't know why they've given us this, because it just looks like a sort of a silly baseball cap. I wear this one every time I go out, and the reason I wear it is it's got flaps, and it keeps your ears warm. My ears get incredibly cold at sort of 2 o'clock in the morning. When you can imagine, the temperatures are dipping sometimes to sort of -3, -4.
Yeah. I don't have the same problem.
The last bit of uniform we get, when they've actually done their 3 bits in red, we then commission people, and they get a copy of the New Testament and Psalms, but also they get their final bit of uniform, which is the baseball cap. Now again, Jack looks much better in this than I do. But basically, any form of headgear is really important, because if we're walking from the Welsh Bridge, I don't know, somewhere out there, isn't it? That way? Welsh Bridge? And we're walking down to the railway station. 2 of us will go down one side of the street, 2 of us will go down the other. And we will keep parallel with what's going on. And then if 2 people stop and deal with an incident, then the other 2 will stop and observe what's going on. Now, if something starts to go wrong, and I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that Pauline is going to kick off, but if she did, then I wouldn't shout help, because that's not any good. That just makes things worse. I take off my hat.
Then we would call the police.
So this is a built-in safeguard for our volunteers, bearing in mind we're putting them out until the early hours of the morning, and we're getting them to do some really difficult and complicated things. We do drugs training, we do safeguarding, we do mentoring, we do probation, all those kind of bits and pieces, but we also do some other bits. We do some river training. And the top picture, you will have all come in by the river this morning, but that's what it looks like at night. You really can't sort of see too much. So right, let's start unpacking the rucksack. We did say we bring the rucksack. So this has basically got 20M on it, and it's actually got a rope in it. So the idea is, and it's the picture that you can see on there, we are issued these by Shropshire Fire and Rescue, and we are trained to use them. So if somebody was floating in the water, so if Jack, if he comes forward, he's got a handle on this end, you'll know. Yeah? So he's bobbing around in the water. I will basically... Whoa.
Well done.
Well done. Went well in rehearsals as well, that's all right. But we can basically throw it, and then obviously I can lob him in. Now, you will notice that he's got a handle. And somebody said at one of the talks, well, you haven't, so that's a bit silly. But it's really important I don't get a handle. Because what happens is if he gets into trouble, I need to let go of my rope. Because if I can't let go of my rope, he can pull me in. So instead of 1 person in the river, we then have 2. And when we're deployed, we will have 5 of these. And we will have street pastors situated down the river, and then we will get a lob and have 1 go. If we miss, the next person lobs, then the next person... And by the time we get to the 5th one, Shropshire Fire and Rescue will be there. Now, we have pulled 3 people out of the river. So let's just sort of tell you a little bit about them. Basically what happened was that there was one night, there was a young man going home with 2 of his friends, and he started to get to the stage where he was walking along Victoria Quay, and then he was flailing his legs around like this, and the girls were going, oh, for goodness sake, what's the matter? And he goes, I need to go to the toilet. And they said, as we all do, if you've got children or grandchildren, what do you say to them? You should have gone before you went out. Well, of course, he hadn't at the club, and he was desperate to go to the toilet. And they said, oh, for goodness sake, do something. So he did. He stepped behind a bush, and behind a bush was the river. So he stepped in to the river in October. So basically, we've got, and the geographers of you will tell me it's got a special name, but basically the river is U-shaped here, and it's got ledges. and he managed to get onto a ledge. But of course, the water's freezing cold, and basically it's muddy, and he couldn't get out. We didn't use this rail line till that night. Basically what happened, I'm not going to get him to do it because he's got his smart sort of trousers on today, but basically we lay on the floor, another one grabbed his feet, another one lay on the floor, grabbed his feet, and they used the street pastors as a ladder to actually get out of the river. So bearing in mind, it's blowing cold at that sort of time in the morning. That was October. In November, we then had a young gentleman and a young lady who were going on a night out. And they were in a situation where it was a first date. Now, I've got into trouble as a talk where I've sort of said to people, we can all remember our first dates, can't we? And one lady said, well, no, actually, young man, I can't. So I'll take ownership. I can just vaguely remember my first date. And bearing in mind, first date, really important. So this young man really wanted to make a good impression. So he bought a new pair of shoes. Well, you would, wouldn't you? You want to make them, very smart. They'd been out, they'd had a lovely time, they'd had a few drinks and various bits and pieces. And then, of course, they go outside, and then they decided they were going to have a kiss and a cuddle, as you might do if you've been out on a first date. But he then decided he wanted to do something she didn't want, so, of course, she pushed him, he pushed her, she pushed him, and he pushed her into the river. So then he's thinking, whoops, first date not going very well now. Been going quite well up to now, but she's in the river. So he then actually did phone 999. A situation like this will go through to the police, to the fire and rescue, and it will come through to us if we're on and it's river rescue. So basically he then sort of thinks, okay, I've done that, I probably ought to do something else now, but bearing in mind new shoes. So he takes his new shoes off, but then he gets in with her. So you've now got November, 2 people in the river. So we arrive at the same time as the fire and rescue and the police. And I always say that the police officers are getting younger. And Pauline says it's something to do about me getting older. Jack actually works for the police when he's not been a street pastor. So they are getting younger. But the police officer said to me, or said to the fireman, why are the street pastors dealing with this? You're fire and rescue. You ought to be fetching these people out of the water. And the man from the fire and rescue said, we train these people. They know exactly what they are doing. Just let them get on and do it. Anyway, we fetched them out. And then what happened, of course, is that when they come out, you then have to sort of do something with them. So basically, we put them in one of these. So this says on it, an emergency foil blanket. So last time you were up the Himalayas or you went out with your walking groups, you might well carry these emergency foil blankets. If you've done a marathon or something like that, you will know what these look like. And now do a Blue Peter moment. Okay, so that turns into that. So that little piece of packet turns into that. Now, the ambulance service call this turkey foil. So what will happen is that if you get somebody, you wrap them up like a turkey. And the reason Jack didn't do this is he's going to be our turkey.
I'm just the guinea pig.
Good, long way down. So the idea is we wrap up the person. It was also, I think it was a WI talk where we were doing this, and one lady said, he's a big turkey, you're going to need 2 sheep. But basically this foil stuff, what it basically does is it stops people from getting any colder. It doesn't actually warm them up. Psychologically, because they've got something wrapped around them, you start to think you're getting warmer, but actually you're not. So what then happens is we take them out of the turkey foil. Thank you.
The reason Jack does this is that Steve and I aren't quite so agile at getting up again.
Yeah. We then wrap them in these, and these are blankets that we're given by Shropshire Fire and Rescue. And these are specially sort of treated blankets that basically will warm people up. They reckon you've got about 20 minutes in the water. This is what it actually looks like. So this is Sally, one of our street pastors in this top picture, doing the throwing at night. This is the daytime, these 3. This is Jo, she's obviously lobbing it out. Now I'm told that these are firemen. I'm told they're hunky firemen. They just look like normal blokes to me, but I'm told by the ladies they're hunky firemen. And they bob up and down in the river, and the idea is that we will then be able to pull them in. So we are trained to do that. That is something which is unique to us. So other street pastors don't do that, but bearing in mind that's why we were started. Okay, this obviously is our town centre, and you can see that this has got the beautiful sort of river right the way around it.
So I'm going to tell you a bit about some of the clubs we deal with now, and you've already seen Steve's geography a little bit, so we're going to test him now, see if he knows actually where they are. What we deal with is mainly clubs and pubs. So we deal with quite a few pubs at the start of the evening because they tend to close a little earlier than the clubs. So we walk down Pride Hill and we go down Butcher's Lane.
Somewhere here.
Okay. And that's where we have things like Libertines and House of the Rising Sun and the Bull. And they're generally quite quiet areas, but we have dealt with things there, but it's more people just falling out of the steps rather than anything else. And as we go down towards the town centre, we generally come across Ashley's Bar.
About there. It's there.
Yeah,
Ashley's.
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
There.
Yeah, you're doing quite well. And then again, we don't really have too much. It's when we start to get to the West End area where we start to get the trouble.
Oh, little dots on. Oh, there we are.
That's the quarry.
It's round Bradley's house. That area there.
So the West End is just the area just across the Welsh Bridge, which is generally where we have Montgomery Towers, which is Wetherspoons by day, nightclub by night. And we have Fever and Boutique now. It's also been the beach and various other different things. We did have the Waterfront and Bonds, but they've both just recently closed. So we do have a few, and then we inevitably end up every night we're out at the Butter Market.
Hey, that's up there.
That's up there somewhere by the Dana prison, and it's generally where most people end up at the end of their night when they can get very cheap drinks and usually just end up face down in a puddle at the end of the night.
So on that note, people will sort of say, oh, street pastors, you deal with people who are sort of drunk. And you deal with people who are sick. Yes, we do. So you will probably, those of you, I know you have a sort of a travel group, and I think you're going to Rome soon, so those people going to Rome will certainly see one of these, and you'll recognise what this is. It's a sicky bag. So in front of your sort of aeroplane seat, or this is off one of the ferries, because we went on a ferry last year, there is a sicky bag. Now the only trouble with these, not very big. So, if you have occasion to go on an ambulance, you will actually get one of these. So this is a slightly better thing because it's obviously got something they can grab hold of, and you can imagine that you can sort of into there rather than into there. Now, this is my poor Daniel's bit. You can get some in there, not a lot, but you can get slightly more in there.
If you're interested, it has a measuring part on the side. You can actually fit about 1.5 litres in there.
But anybody that does any baking, you will know what one of these is. This is a freezer bag. Now, obviously, if you look, you can get more sick in there than you can in there. People groaning. One young lady, one night, she filled up 3 of these.
Oh, it is Monday morning. I think you could let it go at that.
Okay, but just to finish off, one of the other things is we carry water. So when we're out, because we're there to care, to listen and to help, we'll do a lot of high fives. And the trouble is, if you sit on the front row at one of my talks, you get to high five. So we do high fives, and people will go, can we have a bottle of water? And, if you've been out for a drink, you get a bit dehydrated, a bottle of water is good. But if somebody's poorly and you can get them to have 2 bottles of water, then they are sick. And we can then tidy them up. We can then give them a sicky bag, phone for a taxi, put them on some turkey foil, and then basically the taxi drivers will take them home. And if we call for a taxi, then they will come more or less straight away. But Pauline will be able to tell you that you have to pre-order a taxi. And if you don't,
you can actually end up with all sorts of problems. We were called out to the donkey, to the peach tree, which you know, very nice elderly couple. They'd been out for a super evening out, hadn't ordered a taxi, didn't realise they had to. Finished their meal, ordered a taxi. 2:45 was when they were going to take them home. So these very pleasant 80-year-olds are actually stuck outside the peach tree at 10:30, and they've got to wait until 2:45. So we did actually put them in the donkey, and we were going to take them home. Couldn't remember where they lived because they've got Alzheimer's. Anyway, we did manage to get them home, but it has actually put up our general age of the people that we help by a little bit.
So this is actually the street pastors out on the streets. So this is what we look like. This is Marion. She's got there's little dots on again. In the middle picture, there's a Hannah bag, and Pauline's got a Hannah bag. Those are the sort of the smaller bags that some of our female street pastors prefer.
And some of the blokes.
And some of the blokes. The rucksacks tend to be. This is exactly the same as a rucksack that patrol will carry. So normally when Jack's out, because he's a young, bracing young man, he basically gets to carry the rucksack. We also carry a throw line attached to our waist when we're out with the foot patrol. So we have a foot patrol. This picture here is Pauline. She's obviously got a winter hat on. She looks as if she's got the throw line on, actually.
Well, yeah.
One of those
I
hats.
do my bit.
So this is walking up the Mardle, and this is this is Lee. That's the rucksack. So those are the things. Now, when we're out, people are pleased to see us. Our role is different to the police, and we'll talk about the difference between that later on. But we're there to care, to listen and to help, and to make sure we get people home. So they are pleased to see us. This young man obviously is. This is Ian, surrounded by a group of people. This is Natalie with a young lady. This group here, this is a hen night. You can see she's got a garter on and a sort of a thing. I always get told off for this bit of the story as well by Pauline. These young ladies had a very large inflatable thing.
Don't go into too much detail.
But it proceeded wherever they went. So you saw them disappearing off into a club, but you could always see them coming out because this thing came first. But they have a good night. So you get a lot of high fives, you get a lot of hugs, you get a lot of kisses, you get a lot of sort of really nice sort of treatment. And this young lady with the tufty white hair, this is Keith, one of our street pastors. One New Year's Eve, she took a real liking to Keith. And she kissed him for 20 minutes. And he was going, I can't breathe, get her off, I can't breathe. And eventually she let him go. And we carry these, Pauline's trying to find hers, but these are sort of wet wipes, so most of you will have them in your handbag. Certainly if you go out with grandchildren, you will take them with you. We use 3 packets of these to get the lipstick off Keith. And yes,
You wouldn't want to send him home with all that lipstick.
no, his wife might have something to say. And we do obviously carry a first aid kit. So for those of you at the back, does say first aid on it. Somebody said, is that the first aid kit you take out? We don't, we actually take out a much larger. All our first aid is supplied by the West Midlands Ambulance Service. So we are sort of fully first aid trained.
And on the support vehicle, we've got a really big, extensive first aid kit.
Yeah, Pauline's told you that we've got a support vehicle. She's also referred earlier on to something called a donkey, and you're probably thinking, what on earth are people putting? It's not a real donkey. We call our vehicle the donkey rather than the support vehicle. It's much easier to say to people, come and have a coffee on the donkey than it ever would be to say, oh, do come and we'll look after you on our support vehicle.
It's very funny, though, to see actually how many people think it's a real donkey.
We'll show you some pictures. This young man, just to finish off these slides, one night he actually sort of said to Sarah, one of our street pastors, I'm really glad I've seen you guys. 2 weeks ago, you saved my friend's life. That's a really powerful thing for anybody to say to you at any time, but when they do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And what he basically said is, because we're trained, you always look when you're out, if you've got, and there's a group of us, so we've got a foot patrol, there's normally about 4 or 5 or up to 6 people in a foot patrol. And we've also got the vehicle, so because it's called the donkey, there's a donkey driver and a donkey buddy. Basically, we will always try and sort of keep an eye out for that person that is on the outside of a group. So the group will be laughing and joking and being loud or whatever, but it's that person that's on the outside. And those are the people that we will often go up to and say, are you okay? And that's what happened on this night. I went up to this lad and said, "Are you okay?" And he went, "Well, no, not really." And apparently, according to his friend, he'd got a knife and he got drugs and he was going to commit suicide. But because the street pastor went up to him and said, "Are you okay?" And he went, "No, not really." And he said to him, "Would you like a bottle of water?" It was that act of kindness, somebody actually sort of having the time to spend to actually just go and say to somebody, "Are you okay?" And for that opportunity to have that dialogue, it made that significant difference. We belong to something called Team Shrewsbury. You won't see all of these, but all of these things, that's Shropshire Council, that's the Brecon Housing, that's the shopping centre, that's us, Street Pastors, but that's the BID, that's the Fire and Rescue, this is the hospital, this is the Transport Police, this is the University, this is the Recovery Partnership, and this is West Mercia Police. And together we are part of that. So it's important because we're out at the weekend basically making sure that people are safe. And part of the partnership, we actually do have an office in the centre of town. This is the library, and then this is, if you'll notice, this is the archive, and then there's a community hub, and then there's a fruit and veg shop. So we share the space during the day with the community hub, Juniper Training and Credit Union, but we have sole use of the building at night time and at the weekends, which is great because it means we're in the centre of town when we're dealing with it. And this is our support vehicle. It is an ex-police riot van, but it's had the blues and twos taken off it, so it's had a riot shield.
That's very disappointing.
Yeah, very disappointing. And one of our drivers was devastated, he hadn't got blue lights. But it had new clothes fitted on it by Shrewsbury BID, and it now looks like this. So this is our support vehicle. It does have, this is the donkey, and it's got a donkey there, and it's there, and it's also on the back. We're around about here. You can see it on the back door.
Doesn't that look better?
But yeah, so where they used to keep their riot shields inside, we now have a kitchen because we can then do drinks for the homeless and whatever at the weekend. And this is the cage at the back, where there used to be a door, and they used to put the prisoners in the back. These are the life jackets, the throw lines, water, and then sticky bags and various other bits and pieces we use. So basically, it's fully first aid equipped. It's actually got a defibrillator on board, and we are fully first aid trained in order to deal with all sorts of situations out on the streets. And you can see that once a month it goes into the square, where we can obviously sort of talk to people about the work we do. So this was obviously just before Christmas, and it was absolutely sheeting it down with rain. I think it rained non-stop, didn't it, Jack, all day?
Yeah, I think there may have been 10 minutes without rain through the whole 5-6 hours. So
we are allowed out during the daytime, so this is basically, this again is in the square, but this is because of the partnership with Fire and Rescue. This is their inflatable boat. This is actually us at the fire station on their open day. And we used to have an old youth service vehicle. It was a 7-ton lorry. It was actually a beast of a thing. It had got tables, chairs, fully fitted kitchen, it got a wheelchair lift. It was an amazing, but it was a 7-ton lorry. So it was incredibly difficult to get it round a medieval town.
I get into real trouble by calling the new donkey the little donkey. You can imagine, can't you?
I was about to say the same thing.
But yeah, it is the donkey. Okay, we were very excited last year because we actually received the Queen's Award for voluntary service, which means that we were nationally recognised for the work we were doing, and largely because the difference about the throw line training and all the bits and pieces we do. On the certificate which we have signed by the Queen, it says caring, listening and helping vulnerable people in Shrewsbury during the nighttime hours and at the weekend. We are a charity, and you wouldn't believe how long it took my trustees to come up with those 17 words to go on the certificate. But that amply describes what we do. And because we're a charity, obviously you'll see on the table at the front, it's a funding bucket. Everything that we get in is through talks, through people's donations, through sort of churches will obviously be very generous and very supportive of what we do, and we'll do sort of soup lunches and all kinds of things. But we are actually that charity, and we've got the Queen's Award, which is fantastic. So last year, 2 of our people went to Buckingham Palace and had tea with the Queen. The guy in the top picture here, this in the suit, you remember I told you there was a security guard who approached the bishop? That was Pete. He's now our chair of trustees. So he went, and this is Marion. Some of you might know, she's from the United Reformed Church. And I went round to see her, and I was sitting having tea and cake in her living room, and she was going, "Steve, I'm going to Buckingham Palace. What am I going to wear?" And I went, "Well, it's easy.
You wear your street pastor's uniform." And while she was there, she was actually saying, "I think I'm the only person here in jeans."
And this is actually the day, and these are pictures that were sort of taken when sort of Pete and Marion went to Buckingham Palace. But of course, the other street pastors wanted their own garden party, so we did have a garden party later on in the year for all of them. Oh, it's gone again. Right, the other bit of what we do is actually working with the homeless. Because you will know that we have an amazing charity called the Shrewsbury Ark. They're open Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. At the weekend, there is no other people out there doing the checks and balances on the homeless people. That's the work we do. So we will give out lots of teas, coffees, and the current drink is?
Hot chocolate with 4 spoons of sugar.
So, obviously, people will actually say, well, actually, there's an increasing problem with homeless, not only here, but all around the country. We used to be able to say that if somebody was in a sleeping bag and had got a rucksack, that they were homeless. And you could say that if they actually had got a dog, they probably weren't, and they were begging. Having said that, it is now incredibly difficult because 2 of our homeless guys have actually worked out that if you've got a little dog, people will actually talk to you and will give them money. So some of them do have dogs now, and we had one man who used to park his Mercedes just over by the ship, and he used to have all his gear on and his rucksack, and he used to come and sit on the streets of Shrewsbury, and he'd make about £250 a day. They come to Shrewsbury because we are nice people. You are nice people. You will talk to them. And people will often say, well, we've got to do something because it's an increasing problem. There's lots of stuff that is being done, and we've actually started something called the Alternative Giving Scheme. And you'll see this is when Miles was mayor, but we've got these little blue boxes. There are 5 of them around town now, and it's called the Alternative Giving Scheme. And it's about give them a chance, not your change. And the idea, what we say to people is put the money into the boxes, because we know that that then goes to the Rough Sleepers Task Group, and they will then provide money to the people who are truly homeless.
You'll be interested to know that some of the money that was given to one of the homeless guys that was homed, and he hadn't got a fridge. So some of the money went towards buying him a fridge. Now, I personally think that's a much better way of giving and helping.
But what we always say to people, because I mean, a number of times people will come up, particularly after the end of the talk, and say, we've got to do something. Give them a drink or give them a sandwich, but please don't give them money. Currently, there are 12 homeless people in town, but you will see lots more than that. So we probably reckon there's about another 10 that are not. Now, we know who they are because at sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, they will have gone home. So it's an increasingly difficult situation, but it's one that we actually work with at the weekends. Also, we are finding now that we are dealing increasingly with people with additional needs, and largely mental health issues. So we have something where we work very closely with the Samaritans and Mind, and we have something called Sanctuary, which is an arrangement with the Samaritans and with Mind and with the police and with A&E now and with street pastors, that there is somebody at Mind, and their offices are by the Abbey. We can actually take people, and there are paid mental health workers there 24/7 who we can sort of take somebody and they can actually spend some time and sit and have a coffee and whatever. Jack's going to tell you about somebody who we didn't take to Sanctuary, but...
Yeah, so I've been street pastor now for, it's just coming up 2 years in May. And over that time I've got to know a few of the regular faces. And there's one guy that got called out to about a year and a half ago because he had fallen asleep standing up against the wall. So we went and found him. We tried to wake him up, but he was just not waking up. He was fast asleep, just stood up against this wall. His friend came over and he showed us where he lived, so we actually carried him to his home. We got halfway across Welsh Bridge when he woke up, got on his feet and ran across the rest of the way. His friend got him home. A couple of weeks later I saw him again and he came over to thank you. His mate had told him everything that we'd done because he still actually didn't know we'd done anything to help him. And since then I've seen him about 8 or 9 times on the streets and had a nice little conversation. And at the end of January we came across him again, but this time in a completely different state. We were just driving around the town, just making our last checks, and we saw someone on the bridge, so we turned around just to check on them. When we got to the bridge, they were gone. As we were going over the bridge, we saw someone down the towpath on the wrong side of the railings, so we stopped the van in the middle of the road. We got out and ran down there, and it was the same guy I'd seen many previous occasions. When I was shouting to him as I was running to him to make sure that if I just appeared in front of him I wouldn't scare him and he would fall in anyway. But I shouted at him and he looked up and I could see he was in tears. I grabbed hold of one of his arms and one of the other street pastors on duty grabbed hold of the other. We then spoke with him for about half an hour trying to convince him to come the right side because he just wanted to throw himself into the river that night.
And he'd also got on his phone, and he was about to press send, "Goodbye, I love you." So we can really make an impact on what happens on the streets. And we had one other lad who Jack sort of come across. I've got another lad who I've now seen a number of times in town, and he went to a member of staff the one day and he said, "I want to commit suicide." And basically they called us, and I had a conversation with him, and I took him to Sanctuary. He sort of snuggled up when I was sort of sat on the sort of settee and I was doing the handover. I sort of said, "Are you going to be okay?" Well, that was Builders Friday, so that's Mad Friday, the Friday before Christmas, when all things are going sort of pear-shaped for quite a lot of people. Saw him again on New Year's Eve, and he came and stood next to me. And you know when you sort of stood there looking, I was looking at the club, and he sort of was here. And I went, "Oh, it's you." And I said, "Are you okay?" And he went, "Yeah, I'm okay." I've seen him 4 or 5 times since then. And he is getting better, but he's getting a lot of support. And actually, the one day he came in, Jack and I were in the office, and he came in and said he wanted to, the ladies came in and said, "Oh, there's somebody who wants to volunteer." So we went, and it was him. He didn't want to volunteer, he wanted to come and have a chat. So that's one of the things we will actually do. We've also now got... Basically, we are also finding we have problems with drugs coming down from Liverpool and the Wirral. So there's something now called County Lines. You might have heard of it on the television. And basically the situation is that very young people, 14 and 15-year-olds, are being trained to traffic drugs into town. And this is something called County Lines. So we're working against that. There's also something called cuckooing. And what happens is that these people who deal drugs, they're very clever. They will actually target. Remember I said somebody who's vulnerable? They'll target very vulnerable people, and they'll befriend them, and they'll get to know them, and they'll go and have tea in their flat. And then when they know where their flat is, they then turn up the following weekend and say to the person, "Right, you're out. This is now our flat, and this is where we're going to deal drugs." And there was something before Christmas where this had happened in Halscott, and there was a guy, and he was bringing monkey dust down from the Wirral. Monkey dust is that drug where you might have seen on television, people are just zombies and they just sort of shuffle. And it's evil. It is absolutely horrendous, and it has killed people. So we are also now part of something called County Lines, and we're actually dealing with some of that. We do have a friends group, so there are people who will fundraise, bearing in mind that we're a charity, so there's a whole range of sort of bits and pieces that they do. People sometimes say to us, "How can you get involved?" And basically, we are desperately short of funds. We get no money from any statutory bodies. We did get some money from the police, and they literally cut it at the 14th hour, having promised it. It just disappeared. So we do need people to help with fundraising, and we do need people to join us as trustees. So if you fancy being a trustee on a local charity that is actually making a difference, then please do have a word with us at the end.
You could be a street pastor. Our oldest street pastor is 82, and our youngest.
Well, I'm currently the youngest at 21, but we're just about to get another one who is 19.
There you go. Okay, we're now going to sort of come to, Jack's going to work some technology. It was the local authority and the police approached churches together in Shrewsbury and basically said that there was a major problem, and it was the fact that there were 7 people a year drowning in the river. So the solution they came up with was that they started street pastors.
And they've been an active partner in Team Shrewsbury right from the very start, which has been fundamental for us, and they've been a really key player in that organisation. They've taken on board some of the big decisions that we've had to make, and they are as equal a partner as the councils and the police.
Well, street pastors are absolutely crucial in keeping everyone safe around the nighttime economy in Shrewsbury, not just river deaths, but people that are vulnerable through drink or drugs or mental health. They reduce demand on the emergency services, ourselves, ambulance, local hospitals, and they look after the people that are most in need.
I would say in 8 years, there's been really good work been going on. I know the police and the local authorities are really appreciative of more peace on our streets on Friday and Saturday nights.
It's been very different. Every week or every month that we go out, it's different. You know, we can be busy, we can be quiet, but each time I go out, I get a buzz and feeling like you're giving love and spreading the Lord's word around the streets of Shrewsbury.
Well, partly because I've got 2 young teenage daughters, they were at the time. I thought it was really a good idea that if they were out on a night, then there would be someone that they could go to if they got into difficulty.
And I think the street pastors came on board at a time when the town needed it, and they've flourished ever since.
It's great seeing Christians work together across the churches, and it is very much Christian love in action. We go out to do the work of Christ, to look out for the vulnerable, help them. We don't talk about our faith unless people actually ask us, and that's what they do very well. But I know how much they're appreciated by everyone. When I came out with you last year, you know, I just noticed how much people were really thankful for the street pastors.
Yes, I remember one incident in the summer. There was a French lady who lost her young daughter and couldn't find her and was getting very worried, and we offered to look for her, and we went round the quarry and we found her in the bandstand in a very distraught way, and it was such a witness to her that we'd found her and showed love and compassion to this little girl.
So Street Pastors is part of a national initiative, but in Shrewsbury we meet on a Friday and a Saturday evening. We meet at 10 o'clock at night, and we start with prayer, but then we go out until the early hours of the morning.
Yeah, it's a really creative and new way of working, and it shows that by working together with very many agencies we can actually resolve problems.
So by having that kind of real joint partnership, it means that we can really make the nighttime economy as vibrant as we can do, but more importantly, as safe as we can.
It's about a group of people being out there to care, to listen and to help for people who are out as part of the nighttime economy. We really want to take the opportunity to try and encourage people to come out and join in with us and actually sort of see what Street Pastors is all about.
If you fancy joining the street pastors, the prayer pastors, or the donkey team, why not join us on a night out to come and see what we do?
So just to finish, there will... It's like EastEnders, isn't it? Boom, 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 boom. Just to sort of finish before we do the questions bit, is that we do a lot of high fives, because obviously people want to sort of water, but one of the things we give out an awful lot of, and it won't be any surprise, of course, is flip-flops. So what happens, of course, is people are out in their high-heeled shoes, and they then find that they can't wear them later on at night. Ladies, I've had this confirmed by numerous sources. You might remember that in fact you used to dance around your handbags. Well, that is so yesterday. What happens now is that they take their shoes off, they dance around their shoes, can't put their shoes back on, so of course they're then padding around the streets barefoot. So we're basically giving out flip-flops. These actually say clubbed out and barefoot. So those are one of the things. And then finally, the bit, it was actually on the video. Come forward, young man. We have lollies. Now, if Jack had had too much to drink, I could give him a lollipop. If he wasn't diabetic. If he was diabetic, we'd give him a glucose tab. But lollies are quite good for actually just bringing up his blood sugar levels. I always dread this bit of the talk. If I high-five him, oh, that's actually quite gentle, I could then just give him the lolly. But the third and really important reason is if he then started to kick off, and he was starting to be aggressive. He's quite a chunky lad, so am I, but you can imagine that we sort of have a bit of a 2 and 8. We wouldn't, because that's not what we're there to do. I would say to him, would you like a lolly? And then he would get it. And for some reason, they always grunt. And I don't know why they grunt, but they do. They grunt at you, and then they try and unwrap the lolly. And by the time they've done that, they've calmed down.
That's where he superglues these.
They're
and they
really
then
difficult to
kissing you.
I'm not going to kiss you.
Right. And we said to you earlier on about we're not there to police the streets. That is their role. And I always say police carry truncheons and handcuffs. And they have a very specific job. We carry flip-flops and lollies. That is the difference. We're there to care, to listen and to help. And to ensure that we get a whole range of people, from the 88-year-olds through to the very youngest people that are on our streets at the weekends, to get them home safe. Because our role is to care, to listen and to help. But ladies and gentlemen, we say thank you very much for listening to us this morning. Hopefully you have a better feel about what it is to be a street pastor. And if you don't see us coming, you see us going.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
How many groups of 4 do you have on the street at a time?
So the question was how many groups of 4? It will be, the smallest amount we can put out is 3. And we have to put out a mixed team of male and female. Because we're recruiting, we've just been phenomenally lucky. We've got another sort of 7 new street pastors. We can sometimes have 2 teams on foot. So we will have possibly 2 foot patrols if we can, and also the donkey. So the donkey will have a donkey driver and a donkey buddy. Sometimes there are 2 buddies on the donkey as well, so they can operate independently.
So where is the donkey at any one time?
Right, the donkey moves around. It's actually stored at the Monkmoor police station. So there's a little keypad that the donkey drivers will go up and collect it. They'll bring it into town, and it basically drives around. It can be in a whole range of places. Pauline's often a donkey buddy, so you move around, don't you?
Yes, I go wherever is necessary. So we have radios, and our call sign for the donkey is Sierra Donkey. And the pubs and clubs will actually just call for the donkey if they want just the donkey team to go out to help to take somebody home.
So the donkey is registered as a safe place. So it's actually got the safe place stickers on. You'll see safe places around town. So it's actually somewhere where we can actually take people off the streets. We can take the vulnerable person off the streets, but importantly we can take our volunteers off the streets as well. And it therefore means that actually you're dealing with a whole situation actually on the donkey. We work very closely with the ambulance service, which we've not talked about today. What happened when we first started doing this is, of course, we'd have somebody and then they'd take them off us, go into the ambulance, and then they would sometimes give us to them back. Because they now know how we work, and we work so closely with them. If we've got somebody on the donkey who's poorly, then the ambulance service will bring their gear and they will actually treat them on the vehicle. And it therefore means they can do their bit, and they can then often say to us, okay, they're yours again. So that means that the actual vehicle, the ambulance isn't getting dirty, and often we're not actually having to they're not actually taking people to A&E, and we take people to A&E fairly regularly now. Yes?
You say you patrol the inner towns,
Yeah.
pubs and clubs. Do you patrol the river?
Yes, we do. Basically we operate within the loop. So if you sort of think of the loop, we shop in the loop, the bus in the loop, and all the rest of the bits and pieces, that's where we will operate. There's also something called WEMSAR, which is the West Midlands Search and Rescue. They're out on busy high days and holidays, so we will work alongside them. They're great. They come out at 7 o'clock at night, but they go home at 11 o'clock. And you think, actually that's the time where people are starting to sort of get a bit wobbly and go into the river. But yeah, we will do. In the summer we will actually go into the quarry and we will actually patrol along it. The donkey has actually got floodlights on both sides. We can light up the river. We showed you the picture of what the river looked like, that sort of dark thing. We can actually light it up. We can floodlit the whole section. So yeah, we will do those patrols. Anybody else? Yes?
So how much money do you need every year?
How much money do we need every year? About £25,000, because obviously we've got donkey insurance, we've got public liability and employers liability insurance to do the training and everything on for the street pastors.
And the donkey doesn't eat carrots; it actually eats diesel.
Yeah, but I mean the donkey insurance is £1,700 a year. So, you know, just to have a vehicle on the road, that's that cost. Just remind me, I've got to go and pay the tax later. Yes.
The equipment that you've just shown us in your bag, where does the equipment come from? Is that given to you?
No.
Or do you have to purchase it?
We purchase it. The only thing in the whole time we've been going that we've been given are the bottles of water. And they come from the Shrewsbury Hotel. So just literally across the road. And basically what happens, Jack or I can go in now, and it doesn't matter which one it is, Sue will actually go, oh yeah, okay, you need some water. And basically she has given us bottles of water for the 8.5 years we've been going. But everything else we have to buy. Apart from the ambulance sort of stuff, I mean, we don't pay for the sicky bags, fortunately. But we do, I mean, the lollies we have to buy, flip-flops we have to buy, everything else we buy. So, yeah. Anybody else?
Related.
Oh, yeah. Head torches. Yes and no. I got a head torch, and by the time you've fiddled around and unless you've got it on the whole time, and to be honest, it's quite invasive, particularly if somebody's not very well or vulnerable to actually sort of go up. So I carry mine with me, but I've actually got it in my pocket. We got some really sharp torches which were actually given to us by the police. But I mean, the donkey literally lights the place up, so I mean we can do it that way. But yeah, I mean I've tried numerous head torches and they kind of work. But no, we've got really big, powerful torches where we can actually see what's going on in the river.
So are there any schemes where people like us can donate monthly or yearly?
There's a few different ways that can happen. We've got some standing order forms with us if you like the more paper route. There is also an online giving scheme that we've set up, which you can find through our Facebook. It's on Every Click. So if you just search to Every Click and go onto their website and search in their little search bar, Shrewsbury Street Pastors, you'll find us. And you can set up a monthly giving or one-off, and it'll also do gift aid through there as well.
Are you able to get any sponsorship from businesses in town?
Yeah, we've tried the sponsorship route. I mean, obviously, we get a huge amount from Shrewsbury Hotel. McDonald's in the past actually sponsored the flip-flops. Quite a number of the venues actually have boxes. And one of your members and one of our members, and actually one of our charity champions, Reg is actually sort of sat on the second row, and he basically will go around and chivvy them and make sure they've all got boxes. So they sort of donate that way, but trying to formally get them to do it is just incredibly difficult. Yeah.
Trustees, sector specific anything?
No, the bulk of our trustees come from churches, but we do have trustees who have got specific sort of qualities. So obviously, I mean, Pete was the security guy, and he ran the security staff for a period of time. He will actually tell you, when we talk about our street pastors going on a journey, he would probably say that he certainly wasn't Christian when he started and got us going, but he certainly is now. And he's actually changed his role, and he no longer works in the security field. He's actually doing some really one-to-one stuff with some of the most difficult young people you can imagine. So I think he's currently bivouacking or camping or whatever it's called in the Brecon Beacons for 4 days. So he goes away with young people. So he's gone on a totally different journey. We just had a lady who's joined who's got some skills at writing bids, because we need to write funding bids. We are desperately short of a fundraising trustee who's somebody who can actually sort of take that on. Because the more time we spend doing that, the less time we have to basically go out and do the important stuff. One of the things that Jack was talking about the guy that he saw and the guy that I saw, we now have something called prevention plans. So we actually try and plan what our interventions will be, because people with mental... If somebody's drunk, you can give them 2 bottles of water, they're sick, you tidy them up, you put them in a taxi, they go home and they have a headache. And we know that there will be some people who will do that again. But people with mental health issues are people that we are always seeing every other week. And you're having the same conversations. Jack's had so many conversations with his guy. I'm having the same conversation now with my guy. What we're finding is that they are finding a street pastor that they can relate to. Jack's guy is, what, he's in his 20s?
He's 22,
Okay.
I found.
So he relates well. The guy I work with works well with me because he more or less sees me as grandpa. And I am a grandpa. But he relates better. So that's why we have a whole range of people from 83 to 19 as street pastors, because those skills. And that mixed group, that's why we've always got a mixed group out on the streets, because if it's a female that needs help, it's much more appropriate that it's a female that does it. But Pauline, I think, said we do have radios. We have the radios, you see, very similar to the police radios, but we can talk to CCTV, we can talk to door staff, they can talk to us. Donkey's call sign is Sierra Donkey, and our call sign is Sierra Street Pastors. So we're trying to make sure that we keep our volunteers as safe as we possibly can when they're out on the streets, because they're dealing with some of the most difficult and vulnerable people on our streets.
One of the important safety features of the radio as well is that they can be tracked via GPS, so the camera always knows where we are, and there's a little red button on the top, as the same as the police radios. If we press it, everyone with a radio on that system knows that someone's in trouble and they know who they are, and they'd be able to get help.
I pressed the button once by mistake. It caused chaos in town.
Not many of you been injured?
No. In the whole time that we've been doing it, Jack's been doing 2 years.
2 years.
Pauline and I have been doing it for about 6. I've seen 3 incidents of aggression, 2 of which I've dealt with lollies, and the 3rd one was a lady that Pauline had, who she...
I was really upset. We were trying to actually get hold of the duty social worker, and all I did was to beetle over to her and say, would she mind being a little bit quieter, because we couldn't hear the duty social worker on the phone. And the language, I'm there going, ooh, that's made my hair curl. And she was a lady in her 50s, and I'm there going, ooh, that wasn't really quite what I was expecting.
I think the reason we do a lot of high fives when we're out, because they know that we're there to care, to listen and to help. We're there to give out lollies, we're there to give out all the various bits and pieces. So it's very much, I think, the fact that it's interesting, because there was a group of really loud lads coming down Pride Hill, and the language was a bit loud and whatever. And of course, when we're all in our uniforms and we're all plodding down, they're never quite sure who it is. And then one of them sort of spotted and said, "Oh, it's the street pastors, you need to behave." And they stopped, and then one lad kept on swearing. And he said, "You've got to stop swearing, it's the street pastors, they're nice people, they're from church, don't swear at them." And people don't. And we generally find that they don't. I mean, we do have volunteers. Some of our donkey drivers and some of our donkey buddies don't actually go to a church on a regular basis, but they obviously agree with what we do, so they can be part of the support team. But to wear a street pastor, part of our licence, you have to wish for the local church. So we do have volunteers who don't. And it's that mix of people that are out on the streets who just want to care for people. Are there any more?
There was the best case of mistaken identity, though, is some people think we're, and I've got to say my favourite was when I walked up to the butt market once, someone turned around, saw us, threw his hands in the air, said, "Wasn't me, I'm not guilty," and then just walked down the street with his hands still in the air until he was out of view. But we have been called parking wardens as well, but I don't really see that one.
We're going to be around, obviously, sort of, if you've got any questions, we're more than happy. As you can probably gather, I can talk for hours about street pastors. So now I'm going to shut up.
Thank you very much, Steve, Pauline and young Jack. It's been a funny but quite sobering talk. My church is Christ Church of Basin Hill, and some of our members are or have been street pastors, so I have heard the talk before, but it's gone on from when I last heard it, and it's just been incredibly interesting. I think you may get many more volunteers from people here today if they're going to be kissed for 20 minutes whilst out on patrol. Having two of my grandchildren living in Shrewsbury, who are 18 and 20, it's a great comfort to know that there are people like you who are around the clubs keeping an eye out for these youngsters. Thanks for all the work you do, not only as street pastors, but with the homeless and Mind and county lines, and the aftercare that you give to all these people. A heartfelt thanks from all of us. It's been an amazing day.